today I am pleased to be able to interview Dr. Ray Decker, who is going to give us an oral history of his career and background, and we're very excited about that. I'm Eric Nyberg. I'm a product engineer with Kaiser Aluminum in Spokane, Washington. I'm also the current TMS Light Metals Division Chairman. Ray, could you begin by giving us a little bit of career background and where you're at today?
Thank you very much, Eric. This is Ray Decker, and I'm currently Chief Technical Officer of nanoMAG LLC and an active member of the TMS IMD Magnesium Committee. And I'll give you some background here, and I hope to cover 6 topics: the early background, my college and military service, technical inventions, continuing university activities, technical society activities, and national activities. But I'll start out with the early days in family.
Well, why don't you give us a little bit of background about your family and how you all got started in the field of metallurgy to begin with, Ray?
I'm not going back to 1869, but back to 1930, growing up on our family farm in upstate New York, Afton, New York, on the Susquehanna River, a small dairy farm, 140 acres. And as far as family goes, my parents and siblings, my mother was an English history teacher, and she imparted a yearn to learn, a yearn to learn. And my siblings, Charles, Sylvian, Martin, and I all did learn. We all went to grad school. In contrast, my father dropped out of school in 8th grade to become a farmer, but he also became an entrepreneur. And he taught us a yearn to earn. I earn to work hard with objectives, endpoints, with productivity applications as a result of our hard work.
So Ray, it sounds like your mother and father both influenced you quite a bit in the way that you're definitely an entrepreneur, and you've had a very successful academic and education career as well. So it sounds like both your parents had quite an influence on you as an adult.
That's very true. They had a real influence. More and more, I realize that as I age, as I mature. And one part of this was farm boy, and we had chores very early. Once we reached about 10 years of age, we had assigned daily chores and responsibilities, things we had to get done every day. And one was I had a few cows to milk before school and after school. Then we produced cabbage for the New York City grocery market, a yearly crop. And another crop we produced was maple syrup. We had many maple trees, and this is a sap bucket in which we gathered the sap to be then boiled down to maple syrup. So again, earning and producing.
Excellent.
Then high school was in the Afton, New York High School, and it was quite diverse, Eric, all the way from sports, music, journalism, and then leadership in the student councils. And here you can see that I already planned to be an engineer. And that was following my uncle, who was my model. He was a Lehigh engineer graduate who became a colonel in the Ordnance Corps in the Second World War. So I wanted to follow his career.
That's amazing.
Then my favorite sport was basketball. Here I am, a skinny kid. But here's the key guy. I had a mentor, Tubby Crane, who was my gym teacher and coach, all the way from K through 12. And he taught me ethics.
What ways did he, Ray, what ways did he mentor you in that regards?
He was very rigorous on ethics. You don't cheat, you don't lie, and you take a straight line there. And then secondly, you're part of a team. Always work with the other players, assist everybody working with you. Socially be a team in your endeavors. Very influential on what I did. After this, I followed on in exercising. I went into softball in the Army, then played squash later, and today still go to the weight rooms and do a little bit of running even today to keep up the physical exercise, which I recommend to everybody.
That's good advice to us. We should all take a bit more of more of that advice with us every day. Well, thanks for that background. And how about as you moved into the university era?
Okay, Eric. I chose University of Michigan, which was a surprise for a New York upstate boy. But Michigan offered low costs. It was a top-notch engineering school in metallurgy, and it offered a job. I got a part-time job insured, and then I was able to take ROTC following the pattern of my uncle, Jim Bisbee.
Well, what led you to the field of metallurgy as a during at the university there?
Well, my father, we had a shop. He did welding, metal bending, built things out of metal. So I had a taste for hands-on metallurgy. Mm-hmm. And that turned out to be a strong Department of Engineering at Michigan. And I got a part-time job, which I'll describe, which really nailed me into metallurgical engineering. So there I started off in 1948, 4 years of excellent training. But midway through that, serendipity came into play in 1950. I joined TMS and ASM, both technical societies, as a sophomore. And then I got a real good part-time job, double the pay, now at $1.35 an hour. And that's when I launched my alloy design career with a great mentor, Professor James Freeman. And the other serendipity, I got engaged to my 8th grade friend, Mary from Afton. And that was a real good, lucky move. I'm God with you. After finishing my bachelor's, I was called into the service during the Korean War. I served as an Army Ordnance Lieutenant for 2 years. And the first assignment was on metallurgy of the atomic cannon. And my leader there was Colonel Jack Wallace, who later became the foundry prof at Case Western University. My second year was spent in France, in the Army headquarters at La Rochelle, France. Administrative office in the Ordnance Department of that headquarters. Real good 2 years of schooling. Then back, well, I'll mention some family first. We had 4 daughters, Mary and myself, Susan, Betsy, Kathy, and Laura. And then an extended family with our daughters and husbands, Stuart, Dave, and Rick. And then 19 grandchildren that you see here. 5 are missing: Emily, Bill LaCroix, and since this picture, Betsy and her husband Dave adopted 3 more kids: Maddie from Africa, Josie from Haiti, and Josiah from China. So we ended up with 19 grandchildren, and not seen here, of course, are 8 great grandchildren. So a great family.
Well, congratulations on that, Ray. That's an amazing family that you have there, and I'm sure keeps you busy every day with things going on in the family. That's incredible.
I'm now known as Papa Pa.
Pa pa pa. Oh, that's great. How about your career as you started moving into the professional world?
Yes, yes, Eric. So after the Army, back to grad school at the University of Michigan. Dr. Freeman had guaranteed me a job when I got out after the Korean War, 1954. So my first assignment was to study nickel-based superalloys and the variability of turbine blades in jet engines. There was a lot of problem at that time with broken turbine blades in the hot engine, the hot end of the engine, which ran at 800 degrees centigrade. And so I undertook trying to find out the secret of all the variation. And I was very lucky. Serendipity struck again. And I found out that during processing of the alloys, one called Unimet 500, with a base, no trace elements, a life of only 50 hours, poor ductility, which was the reason for the broken blades. But during processing, we picked up boron and zirconium, which we then added in minute amounts. We got 10 times the life and 7 times the ductility, and very good performance on wrought turbine blades at that time. So that was my discovery on my PhD thesis with Professor Freeman, 1957.
That discovery led you a long ways after that, I think.
Yes, and we had technology transfer very quickly. Before I even finished my PhD, the University of Michigan and NACA had a symposium, 1957. That was a precursor to NASA. And we had attending GE, Westinghouse, Universal Cyclops, Allegheny, TRW, and International Nickel, all producers of nickel-based superalloys. And we did a tech transfer at that one-day meeting, and the practice boron zirconium went into commercial use in less than a month. The secret was cleaning up the crystal boundaries of the alloy, the nickel-based superalloy, by large zirconium atoms and small boron atoms, which accumulated at the grade boundary. So that was real fun.
Ray, who was the company that commercialized that, your alloy?
All companies, all these companies commercialized that.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
Every producer of wrought superalloys used that technology very quickly.
Oh,
Out of that, I got job offers.
I bet you did.
With International Nickel. It was international, and it was at that time a Dow Jones company. So it was quite attractive, and I took a job there in 1958. So
I bet they were very happy to be able to hire you after that discovery. You were the expert the expert in the field.
I certainly was happy with that situation, Eric.
No.
So I had a good career, 24 years at Inco, starting in 1958. And this is a picture of our Sterling Forest staff in the 1970s. Here I am. And later in the 70s, I became the corporate vice president of research, managing a lot of research at Inco. But there are several notable inventions by my colleagues, not me, but by my colleagues. And I thought it'd be good to list some of those inventions.
Sure.
Inconel Alloy 690 for nuclear tubing, Metallurgy. Cast Inconel 713 IM100 for turbine blades, Clarence Beaver. Mechanical alloying by John Benjamin. The US coins we now use, laminate dimes and quarters by Jerry Brophy and Bob Gibson. Compact graphite cast iron by Bob Schelling. Processing for manufacturing cisplatin cancer drug by Gaylord Smith. The Metco, a recycling of steel mill waste by John Pargetter.
That's quite quite a bit of development work that was happening at that time under your direction.
And then addition nickel battery electrodes by Bill Bailey, nickel alloy weld wires, Charlie Witherell, superplastic stainless steel, Jerry Brophy, stir cast aluminum nickel graphite composites for wear resistance by Frank Badia, hydrogen storage for autos by Gary Sandrock, genetic engineering for bioleaching nickel ores by Cal Cup, nickel rounds for electroplating decorative coatings by Bert Knapp. Those are all other colleagues. I was not the inventor on these, but I had the pleasure of sharing the lab with these great inventors. But on to my invention of Maraging steels in the early part of my career at Inco.
So where did you head after that period of time with Inco?
I went on to Michigan Tech University as vice president of research. I'll get to that a little bit later in the talk here, Eric.
Okay.
The Maraging steel was the upside down steel, quite different than conventional steel. And it was a concept of Clarence Beaver, who was the great superalloy inventor. Clarence did not have a college degree, but he was very inventive. And his first lesson he taught me was to use the best hypotheses, plan at your desk, but get out in the lab, go out and observe the experiments as much as you can. Get out and watch the melting, the working, the tensile testing, etc. And you'll run into serendipity. You'll see things you didn't expect that you wouldn't see sitting at your desk. So I followed that. But here was the concept. Rather than conventional steel quenching to a hard, brittle martensite, then tempering back to a softer martensite with up to 280,000 psi, add enough nickel so that you can air cool a soft, cold, workable iron nickel martensite with no carbon, and then age up to a very strong, tough martensite with up to 350,000 psi. Now, the first composition Clarence developed was hardened by aluminum titanium, and it turned out to be a bottleneck. It was poor in toughness, poor in corrosion, and poor in weldability. So Inco set up a project team to try to solve the problems. They also had a creative research program where you could try wild ideas without a lot of need for approvals from management. And serendipity hit me again there. And we came up with a cobalt moly hardened version, which had higher strength, good toughness, good stress corrosion, and good weldability. Invented by myself, Alan Goldman, a summer student from NYU, and John Esch, a cast iron metallurgist. We discovered this with small 100-gram melts in 2 weeks by hardness tests. And by luck, one of those 6 compositions today is still the commercial iron 18 nickel, 7 cobalt, 5 moly, 250 grade. This was scaled up to commercial heats of 20,000 pounds in 6 months. It went to commercial use in less than a year. And here are some of the markets that were developed by Inco's market development department. In aircraft, jet engine drive shafts for GE, wing hinges for the French Mirage aircraft, production tooling, in aerospace, rocket motor cases spun out of the soft martensite and aged. Then Apollo 11, Apollo applications that I'll talk more about. Then finally into hydrospace in the CIA clamshells and the Mir 1 and 2 hulls that I'll talk about. First, the CIA steel clamshells. This was thought to be an operation to gain nodules from deep in the ocean, iron nickel nodules, under the auspices of Howard Hughes and the Glomar Explorer and clamshell operation down to 16,000 feet. With Allegheny Ludlam Steel Company, we developed this Maraging steel clamshell that was supposed to scoop under the nodules, pick them up, and bring them back to service. The true game, CIA game, was to recover a sunken Russian submarine, the K-129. And indeed, off northwest Hawaii, that was successful. The Maraging steel clamshell brought a portion of a Russian submarine to the surface. I didn't find out the real meaning of this cover until 2010. I still thought it was the nodules until that time. It was openly revealed in 2010 that it was a superb CIA operation. Moving further into Mary and I visited Finland for the opening of the ASM Finland chapter in 1988. At that meeting was the vice president of a steel company, Lokomo Steel Company. He invited us to see their plant the next morning, picked us up in a limousine, drove to the plant. We went through gutted gates into a new building, and he said he would show us something that the Russians were doing in that building, the Russian Academy of Science. They were building the Mirror 2 and the Mirror 1 submersibles in that building. Here you see the plastic streamlined exterior of the Mirror 2, but inside were two cast Maraging steel hull components with welded on flanges and then Maraging steel bolts, 8 feet in diameter. Within that, a crew of 3 were submerged to 16,000 feet. And these were used in the exploration of the Titanic in the IMAX movie Titanic. And here we see from the Mirror 1, we see a view of the Mirror 2 examining components of the Titanic. For that cast Maraging steel, we had a special invention along with Ed Sadowski, where we went through the martensite reaction 2 times to get a finer martensite, a finer precipitation phase. But from that depth of 16,000 feet to 240,000 miles out, Maraging steel bolt used on the moon in Apollo 11, 1969. Apollo 11 landed with a lunar module on a platform, bolted to a platform. But after exploration, the 2 astronauts, Armstrong and Aldrin, climbed the ladder into the lunar module. Then they had to leave part away from the platform. They were joined by 4 Maraging steel bolts. Here you can see components of those bolts. And they were redundantly, explosively sheared. 4 bolts had to go off twice at the same time by electrical stimulation. They had to go off at the same time and successfully explode and separate, or the 2 astronauts would not have been able to return to Earth. And here I have some of those components, souvenirs that I was given by Grumman Aircraft. And this is test number 164 of 600 test samples that were tested to assure the proper separation of the lunar module from the landing platform.
Ray,
and
Ray,
one
I
of
don't,
these,
Ray, I don't think there's too many people on planet Earth that can say that material they developed was used and is sitting up on the moon right now. That's amazing, Ray.
and this piece right here is still on the moon. Not this one, but a similar piece is still on the moon.
That is absolutely incredible. That's amazing. Ray, that's pretty incredible stuff there. Where else was Maraging steel used or do we see it today even in your career?
Well, here's another one, Eric. Mary and I were in Moscow at the Steel Institute, and we ran into the case where Russians used Maraging steel for their Olympic epis. The story was that their 1986 gold medal winner was killed in an accident during practice where a steel epi snapped and penetrated his mask. So they moved to Maraging steel, tougher, more ductile epis in the Russian Olympic epis. Then another application is in golf clubs, making the face of the golf club a driver out of Maraging steel to give a trampoline effect, a acceleration of the ball as it leaves the face of the driver. And here's the bad one. We worked with the national labs to adopt Maraging steel for centrifuges for processing uranium. And that was stolen by A.Q. Khan from Pakistan, who then became the father of the atom bomb in Pakistan. And he sold the technology of centrifuges to Iran and North Korea. So that was a real bad story coming out of the invention. But moving on to Thixomolding, semi-solid injection molding of thixotropic magnesium alloys.
This is when we met about 1999, Ray.
Yes, this is where we started to work together on committees and work together with work you did at Pacific Northwest. Yes. The basic research was done by Dave Spencer and Bert Fleming at MIT. Then the applied research by Dow Chemical, Nor Bradley, Robert Busk. And we picked it up. We did a deal with Dow to start a company to commercialize the technology. 1989. My partners were Dave Dawson and Bob Carnahan. It went much further than we had hoped. It now is 550 machines in 13 countries around the world, still growing today from that period of 1990. Our partners were Dow Chemical, Spalding, Lindbergh, Comelco from Australia, Amtech from Canada, Japan Steel Works from Japan.
Well, the principle in the field of light metals and castings, Thixomolding has become a very well-known terminology, and a lot of that resides right there with you, Ray. So congratulations on that achievement as well.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a principle of the Thixomolding, a pictorial of the machine, starting with chipped raw materials, heating in the hopper, and then introducing to a rotating, reciprocating screw where the granules were heated, partially melted, and sheared, and then suddenly injected, shot into the mold, making a part, a net-shaped part. It used thixotropy. It's like honey. The faster you spread it, the more fluid it becomes. Same thing with metals, semi-solid metals. This is what a small machine looks like. They're now made up to 1,300 tons. This is a 220-ton machine. It's a safe, clean environment. It's a portable foundry. Machines have been moved several times from country to country to reach 13 countries. Applications. The first one was in Japan with Sony, the Walkman, with which you're familiar. Then into laptops, cell phones, DLP projectors, digital cameras, etc. Then surprisingly into sporting goods, bicycles, Shimano fishing reels, Oakley sunglasses, K2 snowboards, and Shaggy non-vibrating skis, and then motorcycle fairings with Buell motorcycle. Then into autos for various applications, including seat backs and quite a few boxes for gear shifts, etc. And finally, into the medical field with toolboxes for the surgeons, lightweight, and now into knee braces, where we manufacture magnesium components for the DonJoy Ortho Nano knee brace, lightweight. And they've sold well over 250,000 of these lightweight knee braces. And this moved us into the biomedical field. We started up nanoMAG for magnesium alloy body implants in 2012. A startup along with Steve LeBeau. And effectively, we manufacture human bones from magnesium alloys, fixing bone fractures. Our principles of alloy development: we wanted a bioabsorbable magnesium alloy to fix bones. We microalloyed to get the right corrosion rate and the right strength for bone replacement. With body nutrient elements: magnesium, zinc, calcium, manganese, all of which you'll find on the vitamin pill bottle. We picked co-segregating elements, that is, small zinc atoms and large calcium atoms, to get segregation in the alloy. And then we processed for less than 20 nanometer microstructures, viewed at 3 million magnification in the atom probe and high definition electron microscopy. And then we designed in C+A dislocations on the pyramidal planes of magnesium to gain ductility, avoiding rare earth additions. My co-inventors were Steve LeBeau, Dan LaCroix, a summer student from Michigan Tech, and Jake Edict. We got the targets from Elizabeth Parapesco of Zimmer Biomet. And here's the nanostructure at 3 million magnifications. Alpha manganese particles of 8 to 120 nanometers for fine grains. And here are the actual zinc and calcium atoms, small and big, segregated, co-segregated on planes of the magnesium matrix. The size of the zones is 0.5 nanometer to 15 nanometers to strengthen the alloys. Micros done by Professor Allison and McEhenny at UMich. Examples of implants are for arm fractures, for fixing ACLs, for dental vertical augmentation, and for mid-phase fracture fixing. And here's the conversion of the magnesium alloy to bone. This was done in a rabbit femur in 52 weeks. Here we see part of the original implant. Then eating in on the implant is a transition layer, and then eating in on the transition layer is new bone. Here's a calcium map, electron micrograph, showing high calcium in the bone to assure that it is bone. And then you can see some calcium in the transition layer. So effectively, these layers are moving in and eating up the implant, making new bone, implant to bone.
You know, Ray, I broke my leg years ago and had to have a stainless steel screw put in there, and then 10, 11 weeks later, another surgery where they had to remove that screw. And I wish I would have had one of your magnesium screws in there and I could have been done with it the first time.
That's the purpose, is to have a screw to replace titanium or stainless steel, where you often have to take the permanent implants out.
Yeah.
Our purpose is to dissolve and obviate that possibility.
Yeah, that's great.
You're a good test sample. We should get ready as soon as we can.
I hope I don't have any more. No, I'm finished with those injuries, I hope.
Then we've had a large NIH-sponsored project in a canine model with 76 canine on healing the jawbone. And here we see that 4 weeks after operation, the fracture is partly stabilized. You can see the screws, the plate is in the background. But after 52 weeks, the bone is entirely healed, better than titanium. And part of the screws have already started to dissolve, to absorb. Now we broadened this out with partners, always partners, to mid-face, to dental vertical augmentation of jaw with Pittsburgh, sports medicine with MDC, spine restoration with University of Michigan, ACLs with MDC, and foot and ankle fixation by MDC. Our partners being Andrew and Charles of Pittsburgh, Rob of MDC, Professor Goldstein and Kosloff of University of Michigan. There are some possible additional benefits of these that we're still working on, one being antibacterial effects to prevent infections, then a possibility of osteoporosis treatment and ear bone restoration. All these need to be thoroughly investigated. All of these need to be passed by FDA before they can be used on humans, but we're pushing toward that. So here's my recipe for alloy design and application coming from those technical investigations. Have a basic research foundation, apply computer software, go to the lab and confirm and observe the experiments. Look for Serendipity by the princes of Persia. Go to the library, go to the technical societies, TMS, ASM, MRS, for their support. Apply market development from the start. Then stir vigorously with your partners.
That's definitely proven to be a good recipe for success. I'd say you've got one of a kind parts on the moon, and then you've got parts that every one of us holds in our hand in cell phone components. So that's really amazing, Ray. And I really like the part where you use the computer to design the alloys, but then you always emphasize getting out there in the lab and witnessing, so you can observe those serendipitous moments. That's really important, I think. Well, thanks, Ray, for all of that. I know everyone is going to be able to really appreciate that. I think with your experience and so much that you've seen, I wonder if there's any recommendations you can give to the next generation of material scientists, metallurgists, and in addition to that, maybe your vision of trends you see materials going into the future.
Yes, glad to comment, Eric. The opportunities for young people are very, very numerous in the field of engineering and materials engineering. We have some outstanding challenges, like in energy, like in climate change, which can be very exciting to attack and very satisfying when you solve practical solutions to these challenges. Our tools are much better, our knowledge is much better. So it's a very exciting prospect for young people these days. And from where I sit right now, I think the opportunities are greater than they ever had been, and the best things are yet to come. Many surprises, much serendipity, and much application of technology to solving the world's problems. So you've got a great career ahead of you in approaching science and technology. That's the message to all people entering the field.
What's your take on additive manufacturing, Ray? That's a huge topic in today's materials world. Where do you see the additive manufacturing and the integrated computational materials engineering, these areas in particular?
I've paid considerable attention to that, Eric. Good question. I'm on the board of Questech Innovations, which is a leader in the field. So I observed their activities now for 8 years. It's very exciting, very promising field, very powerful. You can now develop an alloy from basic theory in a matter of a few months, narrow in very quickly on the solution with the power of the computer and the basic models. Additive manufacturing is a particularly challenging field, a very complicated field, but now there are some sections of that field which are becoming more promising, more practical, more near term. One is nickel-based superalloys for repairing turbine blades. Another is titanium components for aircraft. And one that I particularly like is one that Questech has developed, a simple Maraging steel for replacement parts. It's a stainless Maraging steel, lower cost, where you don't have to heat treat, you don't have to use pressure treatments after forming the part. You can treat and use the alloy as cooled from additive manufacturing as machined. This is particularly promising for in-field replacement of spare parts, like shipboard. If you have a failed part on shipboard, thousands of miles from port, if you had an additive manufacturing machine on board, you could make a spare part in copper alloys. If you're in the field with an ordnance field maintenance unit behind front lines, and you have a failed tank or failed truck or vehicle, you can replace that with a Maraging steel stainless part, get that unit back in operation within a couple of days to protect the men in the Army.
Well, it just goes to show you that the invention and the materials continue to evolve as time goes on. So you started in Maraging steel, and they're still working on it today. That's amazing.
And the additive manufacturing is going to be a real winner. We're not sure which fields will be the best yet, but it's an area of very high research and development activity, and you can be sure something very significant will come out of it.
For sure.
So it's a good field to follow.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Ray. Ray, could you tell us a bit about some of the influences that you had and some of your colleagues that you had while you're at the universities?
Yes, Eric, glad to do that. I had at Michigan a very dedicated faculty, and it was very much aligned to application of metals and attuned to objectives of application and practical use of what we learned. So that was certainly a trend of the teaching of my mentor, Dr. Freeman, my other professors on the faculty of metallurgical engineering at Michigan. One other that I should mention is Professor Maurice Sinnott, who led me into joining TMS and ASM as a sophomore. That turned out to be one of the best pieces of advice I had ever received at Michigan. We had a very good high temperature alloy test lab at the University of Michigan which I joined in 1950 with the help of my friend Jack Rowe, who later received a PhD from Dr. Freeman. He was a very good friend and colleague who helped me do the best in school and find the best outlets for my energy in school. I had very good advice.
We would say that today is he kept you out of trouble, Ray.
Yeah, kept me out of trouble. I didn't have time for trouble. Then another prof was Dick Flynn, who knew the human side of engineering. So he was a very good leader in teaching us interactions with other engineers, interactions with the societies, and just plain having fun with metallurgy, including a softball team where he was the ace pitcher.
That's great.
And we had several colleagues in the high temperature lab who were real contributors to superalloy metallurgy at that time. And they've gone on to excellent jobs. Dr. Flynn was a big influence in going to Inco. He had worked there in previous days. And so he gave me a very high recommendation to choose Inco amongst the various offers I had upon receiving my PhD. Then another professor is Will Bigelow, who still is a retired professor from the department at Michigan today. And he was a pioneer in electron microscopy on my thesis committee, and he performed the electron microscopy on the samples I had, discovering the effects of boron zirconium. So many good memories from Michigan, and memories of the ability to work my way through school. I came out debt-free and receiving my PhD, which would have been impossible at many universities then and today.
Yeah.
That was a nice way to start the career.
Absolutely.
In industry without having debt, being able to start out buying a house, etc.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's great to be able to reflect and remember those that influenced us throughout our careers.
The other thing about Michigan I recall is the honor system. And in any exam, we filled out a blue book, and there was a section at the end where you signed a pledge that you had not cheated, nor had you seen anybody else cheat on the exam. And I do not recall ever seeing anybody else cheat or cheating myself. So that was ingrained in graduation from University of Michigan. I'm sure many other schools.
Yeah. That's great.
Yes.
That's great, Ray. Can you, are there any other people or influences that you had during the university days?
Yes, I certainly want to mention my good experience at Michigan Tech University. I was recruited there by Dale Stein, a great metallurgist who was president of Michigan Tech. Dale raised the quality of Michigan Tech very much to the point where a Michigan Tech undergraduate materials engineer is highly sought throughout the state of Michigan and throughout the country. They're noted for practical application, hitting the road where the rubber counts. And I had a great experience with Dale, a very fine man and a very influential fellow. He was very active in TMS also, and I'm sure he's a fellow of TMS. But I have great admiration for his accomplishments at Michigan Tech University. We started, Dale and I started a bioscience department or division at Michigan Tech. It specialized in growing faster growing trees, genetic engineering trees to grow faster for lumber. But also we did work on changing the color of certain trees to be more attractive as furniture, as woodwork. So that was the start of some genetic engineering work under the Bioscience Institute at the university, at Michigan Tech University.
Well, that's interesting, Ray. That's I know some MTU grads, and they definitely know their stuff. So I can appreciate that.
Now I'd like to talk, Eric, about my great experience with you and with TMS. I joined TMS.
Tell us, please tell us about your experiences with the technical societies that you've been involved with. I know that's been a big part of your career as well.
Well, I joined TMS in 1950. Just recently became a fellow. In the 70s, I was on the planning committee, and I've been on the magnesium committee with Eric for many years. And there was an honorary symposium for me this year. And I did win the Magnesium Technology Best Paper Award in 2019. And way back, I won the Robert Mayle Gold Medal honorary lecture. And now I continue to learn from TMS publications and symposia. And truly, TMS has been my learning machine from the sparse knowledge of 1950 to our deep knowledge of metallurgy today. Somewhat different experience in ASM. I joined in 1950, became a fellow in 1970, and we did some planning. I was chairman of the Diamond Decade Planning Committee, 1984. That's when we decided to expand from metals to materials, from the US to international. And I was chairman of the Name Change Committee. That led to chairman of the organizing committee of the World Materials Congress in 1988, where all the materials societies around the world came to join us. I served as president of ASM from 87 to 88, and that's where we did the transformation of American Society of Metals to ASM International. Since then, I've been very active in the ASM Materials Education Foundation, first as chairman, but now I'm still active in this purpose of STEM education, science and technology education, exciting young people in our profession, camps for teachers and students. We've had more than 7,000 high school teachers in these camps so far. And this is a continuing favorite activity of mine in my professional activities. Summarizing my university appointments: part-time adjunct at Brooklyn Poly, night school, New York University, same. Then vice president at Michigan Tech University from 82 to 86. And now, since 94, adjunct professor at the University of Michigan. And also interacting with universities, we've had joint nanoMAG research projects sponsored by National Science Foundation, National Institute of Health, Department of Energy, involving Michigan, Pittsburgh, Nebraska, Santa Barbara, New Hampshire, North Carolina, A&T, Michigan State, MTU, Ohio State, Madison, and with Eric at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. Then another activity, national activities on the National Materials Advisory Board in the 70s, election to the National Academy of Engineering in 1980, election to the executive board of SHARP, the U.S. Strategic Highway Research Program in the 1980s. And finally, as chairman of the Research and Technology Coordination Committee of the Federal Highway Administration in the 1990s. The results were published in Public Roads, co-authored with Don Kelly, Developing Long-Lasting Lower Maintenance Highway Pavement Research Needs. A major product of SHARP was SuperPave, long life, rut-free asphalt highways, widely adopted in the U.S. highway system. To observe finally the trends during the 70-year career, we've seen a great advance in basic knowledge and models. Powerful new instruments. 1958, we saw only 1,000x, but now in today's field, we go up to 3 million magnification. Now we have an internet library going from 44 journals in 1958 to 1,100 materials journals today. An acceleration of information transfer and ease of access, computerized alloy design, a strong role of the universities, the national labs in generating technology and transferring it to industry, increased financial support from government agencies, a big benefit of more women in the technology workforce. In my 1952 bachelor's class, engineering at Michigan, there were 3 women out of 500 graduates. Today, about 35% of the metallurgy materials department in Michigan are women, and they are good. And now we've expanded from a US technology base to a broad-based international technology base to the benefit of all of us. A final piece of advice back to the milking of cows, the 3-legged career stool. I recommend finding partners, going to the library, the technical societies for continual learning, and going to the gym for exercise. And finally, the most important slide, recognizing all the support I've had during these various activities. The Magnesium Committee of TMS, National Science Foundation, National Institute of Health, State of Michigan, the strategic partners, Dow, Lindbergh, Spalding, Comelco, Amtech, JSW, Inco's R&D and market development. And the universities of Michigan, Michigan State, Pittsburgh, New Hampshire, California, Santa Barbara, North Carolina State, A&T, Nebraska, Michigan Tech, with Tracy, Professor Jones, Torrey, Professor Pollock, Professor Allison, McEnany, Professor Marquis, Lindsay, Etienne, Professor Goldstein, Professor Kozlov, Professor Bollert, Professor Brown, Professor Sphere, Professor Tateya, Dani, Professor Nisevec, Professor Bayerlein, Professor Jag Sankar, and of course, Eric Nyberg at Pacific Northwest. And thank you very much, Michelle and Eric, for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Well, Ray, it's been an honor to work with you. I learned a lot from you over the years, and it's really unique to find a person who can explain things on different levels to different people, and it's really my pleasure and honor to be able to capture your career today, and I am very proud and happy to be the one to be able to interview you today, and thank you very much.
Thank you.